Gather round, dads, it's time for a tale. Hand me a book and a warm pint of ale. Let's discuss writing and the literary gods with Dan Roberts on the Dadlit Pod.
Welcome to the Dadlit Pod, the literary podcast for people who actually enjoy the Zen art of lawn care. Today, I am joined by Michael David Wilson. He's the founder of the popular UK horror website, podcast, and publisher, This Is Horror. He's the author of The Girl in the Video They're Watching with Bob Pastorella, House of Bad Memories, and Daddy's Boy. His work has appeared in various publications, including the No Sleep Podcast, Dim Shores, Dark Moon Digest, and Hawk and Cleaver's The Other Stories. Michael lives in Gifu, Japan?
Gifu, Japan.
Gifu, Japan. The This Is Horror podcast, which he created and hosts, is a weekly show for readers, writers, and creators. Alongside his co-host, Bob Pastorella, Michael interviews writers, artists, publishers, editors, and creatives every week. He has interviewed hundreds of creators for over 12 years and 600 episodes, including Chuck Palahniuk, Dean Koontz, David Dastmalchian, Joe Hill,
Yes.
Joe R. Lansdale, Charlaine Harris, Ellen Datlow, David Moody, Jennifer Lynch, Jenna Files, and Josh Ballerman, who I believe has a movie coming out based on one of his books. Well, anyway, Michael, thank you for coming on. 600 episodes. I'm on, this is 30.
Yeah.
And it feels like a real mountain at 30. What would you say is the key to hanging in there for 600? Is it just having a great co-host at This Is Horror?
I mean, firstly, let's not sniff at 30 episodes. That's a fantastic achievement to begin with. And I think much like with writing or any sort of creative pursuit, it's just making that commitment that you're going to do it and then showing up.
Yeah.
Deciding when you're going to do it. So if you have a schedule, right, like Friday night is my podcast night and
Mhm.
Saturday morning is the editing, or however you want to split it up, then that will kind of get you through because you'll almost automatically know this is what I do at this time. I suppose it's like any sort of routine, be it writing, be it fitness, you are training yourself to do that. But I think, too, I mean, particularly when we're talking 600 episodes and over a decade of my life doing this, you have to make sure that you're keeping things interesting for yourself as well as the
Yes.
listeners. So, looking at your why. What is the reason? Why are you doing this? And then making sure that the choices you're making mirror that they kind of marry up together. So if you're doing it to have interesting conversations about the craft of writing and life lessons, which is kind of what we're doing at This Is Horror, and that's your main why, then you need to be inviting people on who you've really resonated with their books. If you decide, actually, I'm just going to only invite people on who have, let's say, have sold the most amount of books or have the most followers on social media, because I think if I do that, then maybe I can piggyback off that and grow the podcast, you'll actually fail because it's in conflict with what you're trying to do. Now, there are smart ways you could have a kind of strategy where you bear some of those things in mind. But if you isolate the very reason in which you started out and you start saying, oh, this person only has 100 followers, so I'm not going to talk to them. And it's like, but do you love their books? Did they really resonate with you? So with This Is Horror, in terms of, I'll have people ask, how can I get on the show? And it's not an easy one to answer, because essentially, if I really enjoyed your book, that's the best way to get on the show. So send me the book. Hopefully I can read it. I mean, I can read it, but it's
It
going,
takes
there's a
time.
backlog. I don't want
Yes.
people to hear, and now I get thousands of emails. But I do check out each book, and then, see what did I think. Now, with some of them, I might not necessarily read all of it, but I'll give it like a good go. I'll probably read the first minimum kind of 10 to 20%, just to see, is this something that I'm vibing with. Also, I'll look into, well, what's the synopsis? Are these themes that I connect with? I gravitate towards horror and dark fiction and crime and thriller. So if you're trying to come on the show and you've written an epic fantasy or a romance fantasy, I can't even remember what they called them. They merged the term romance and a romantasy.
Yeah.
It's just going to be a harder sell, because that's not what I naturally gravitate towards.
Mhm.
But, if somebody said, this is the absolute best romantasy in the world, okay, well, I'm going to give it a shot. But I'm just saying that the barriers to entry and my enjoyment, it's higher. It's kind of the same with music. My favorite genre is heavy metal. So if you're coming to me with an R&B song, it's going to be a harder sell. But if you say it's the best R&B song in the world, I'll try it out.
So it generally you do just horror at This Is Horror, right? And
I,
thrillers.
to be honest, I think, I do think that the label "This Is Horror" these days is a little bit misleading, because
Really?
really what it should be called is "This Is Fiction that Michael David Wilson really enjoyed reading," but it's not as catchy. So we do primarily cover horror, but I suppose the cheat is that mine and Bob's definition of horror is incredibly wide. So
Hmm.
it will encompass dark fiction, it will encompass crime. Horror can more be a lens in which you view the world through. So we are interested in dark, gritty themes. For me, I'm most interested in realistic horror, real life horror. But Bob and a lot of other people, they really enjoy the supernatural and monsters and things of that nature. So actually, us having slightly different tastes also widens the kind of remit as to who could be on This Is Horror. I mean, if I think about some of the people in the introduction, you mentioned Chuck Palahniuk. Now, certainly recently, with things like Not Forever, But For Now, he has gone more into that horror realm. But
Hmm.
I don't know if you'd ever say what he's doing is pure horror. It's horror tangential. And if you look at Fight Club, I mean that is a dark thriller. That is a groundbreaking book. That is one of the best books of the last 30 or 40 years.
Hmm.
But if you said this is a horror book, I mean it's a book that could appeal to horror fans and certainly have horror-like elements. I mean, it's about somebody absolutely losing their mind. It's about the horrors of commodification within this world. It's about, toxic masculinity and the limits that you might go to because of that and because of the system that you're living in. But yeah, it's horror tangential rather than, you know, pure horror. And then we'll be talking to Gabino Iglesias in a few days, in fact.
Mhm.
It's the second time he'll have been on the show, but the first time was about 5 or 6 years ago. So the beauty of having a show that's been going on for 12 years is you can say welcome back as if they were on yesterday, and over half a decade has gone by. But I would say with his stuff now recently he's been put in the horror bracket. I think perhaps marketing wise and in terms of the publisher that he's with, but it is dark, gritty crime. I mean,
Mhm.
often what he's doing is referred to as barrio noir.
Yeah.
I don't even know if there's anyone else really doing exactly what he's doing.
Yeah, so in this case, we're
Um,
talking about The Devil Takes You Home, and what is he just re-released another book.
well, he just re-released two books, one of them being Coyote Songs. They
Yeah.
they were the two books that he had with Broken River Books,
Hmm.
which is the reason we originally interviewed him, 7 or so years ago. And so the distinction was that those first two books were more in the crime genre, and
Hmm.
then the latest two, The Devil Takes You Home, and another book that I recently read, and now that I'm on the spot, it's like, goodness, what is it called? That they are more marketed in the horror camp, but particularly the latest one, the horror really only comes in at about the 30 or 40% mark. And then
Yeah.
it's like, oh, okay, something really interesting is happening in terms of the weaving of genres, because before then it was more a straight crime book,
Hmm.
which for my taste is absolutely fine. I'd absolutely love devouring the likes of Jim Thompson and Elmore Leonard and just all that old school pulp crime goodness. But yeah, what Gabino is doing now is very distinct, and I think I was going to say we're going off topic. I don't even know if there was a question. This is kind of how it goes when
Yeah,
when
this
I
is
talk.
the Dadlit Pod is sort of we just sort of do whatever we want.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
guided by the questions I'm interested in, right?
right.
And so don't worry. You can keep going. We
Well, I
we
was a further complication is when I'm asked a question, and I suppose because I'm so used to doing the interviewing, sometimes I'll start answering a deviation of the question that was asked. Like, I'd be very good, perhaps, as a politician, because I wouldn't actually answer any question directly. But what I was going to say, I mean, I think in terms of really making your mark at the moment, it is writing between the cracks of genre and doing
Mhm.
things that are distinct and doing things that are different. Those are the people who are really getting noticed. Now, we mentioned Josh Malaman. Well, incidents around the house has absolutely exploded in terms of popularity. And, it's so fantastic to see, because with a lot of authors, we see one just mega book that so exceeds all sales and
Yeah, yeah.
notoriety. With Chuck Palahniuk, that would be Fight Club. Well, with Josh Malaman, already a number of years ago, he had that happen with Bird Box, and I feel it's happening again. The same level of response that he got to Bird Box is happening with incidents around the house. And I think one
Josh.
of the reasons that's
Oh, sorry,
happening,
sorry.
no, it's okay. And I think it's because of it's a pure horror story, but it's the vehicle in which it's delivered. It's the
Hmm.
nearest to a found footage book, on the page that I've seen. And so he's not only playing with genre, it's like he's created a new genre. He's created found footage on the page in the way that he's delivered incidents around the house. I think a lot of that might also come from the perspective in which it's told. So it is a a haunting, kind of in the vein, I suppose, of Paranormal Activity, for a movie comp there. But it's all told from the perspective of the young girl, of the daughter. So we're seeing it through her eyes, which it makes it more terrifying. It messes around with, how reliable is
Mhm.
this narrator? And I mean, goodness, I shouldn't say too much about it because I think people should go out and buy the book. But it really messes with your expectations and is doing something very unique indeed. To be honest, even though I like Josh's work, it took me a few pages to really get into the way he was delivering the story.
Mhm.
But once I was in, oh, I was in.
Josh, I think is interesting because I hadn't read Bird Box, but I'm familiar with the story. I've read Incidents Around the House. And then I also started, what's his one about the two towers with the kids who have the names associated with letters? He's got another speculative fiction work. And in each of them, it struck me as interesting that he has a focus on uh, family, but on characters who are not necessarily related to the children that they mine, and sort of that effect on them as people. And I thought that was interesting that he's done that in at least three works, including Incidents Around the House. But I'm not going to go into further in Incidents Around the House, but uh, I thought that was interesting. And I wondered if Josh writes dad lit horror. He sort of writes family lit horror.
That's an interesting way of looking at it. And I don't know if I've ever heard anyone discuss Josh's work in those terms, but particularly when we look at, yeah, when we look at Bird Box and we look at other things that he's done, he certainly plays with relationship
Yes.
dynamics and kind of almost in a way challenging conventional
Hmm.
relationships. We see that in some of his stories as well, that in his shorter stories, I should say. There's a collection, Spin a Black Yarn, and in, I believe it might be the opener, Half the House is Haunted, he also plays with relationships and dynamics and family. I'm going to have to to bring this up with Josh and see, yeah,
I just
see
thought
if
it
he's
was,
even thought about it. Like, is he consciously doing this? Why is he gravitating towards that? I
yeah,
mean,
that's
not in
what,
an accusatory way, but it's a very interesting thing that he's playing with. So he's not only challenging genre convention, but he's challenging relationship convention, family convention. He's he's an innovator.
yeah, I just thought it was interesting because as you said, there's the Barrio Noir from Gabino, and obviously Stephen Graham Jones is another example who seems to be doing kind of a horror western
Mm,
almost, a sort of western horror element, and it's intriguing to me that those things have emerged as kind of almost uh, taking settings and embracing the settings and then following through with that. And those are the I think probably the three big male authors right now, right, doing horror that are pumping out regular works. Or am I missing somebody?
I mean, there's a lot of people doing good work. So,
Oh, well, no,
I
I
mean,
mean, yeah,
we always are missing somebody. The one who
yes.
immediately comes to mind is Paul Tremblay.
Oh,
A
yes,
head
Paul
full of ghosts
Tremblay.
and the cabin at the end of the world.
Yes.
Survivor
I
song.
I had
Yeah.
started reading Paul's book about the house, about the haunted house and the woman who comes back to the haunted house to deal with her brother. But I didn't finish that one. I ended up reading The September House, which was very good, which was by a debut author and a really, really fun and interesting work of horror. The thing that I think is interesting, and tell me if I'm wrong in this regard, is that when it comes to thrillers, right, the big um, divergence seems to be that in the area of horror, an author is permitted greater opportunity for description and setting and ambiance and that sort of thing. That they're almost the author is expected to present more of a mood rather than all action or all motion. Would you say that that's fairly accurate, just as a genre convention or as understanding the genre?
I think when it comes to, yeah, the more mainstream horror, or particularly when we're talking about traditional horror and old school, like really going back. And if you look at what people like Ramsey Campbell and Adam Neville are doing, then you can't start by showing the monster or the entity. You've got to almost lavish in terms of the setting and
Yeah.
the aesthetic and getting you into that environment. It's almost like you've got to get you comfortable and then you create absolute unease and foreboding and dread. Although I think there is foreboding and dread in being comfortable.
Hmm.
You know that you're not going to be comfortable forever. And it almost reflects what it's like if you go to stay in an old manor house or a kind of hotel and you're told this is haunted, or not just this is the most haunted house in this country. Well, even if you don't believe in the supernatural, it's gonna put you on edge a little bit. And I
Hmm.
think that's kind of what you're doing with these classic horror books and this classic horror mode. So I think what you've said is right for classic horror, but now, as I said, like I take a very wide lens in terms of what horror is. I think now there are genres, that the pulpier side of horror is completely different to that. I guess the more action based horror, if you look at like the writers like Sean Hudson, and you look at people like Richard Lehman, and then the more modern example being Brian Keene. And then if you look at splatterpunk, which is a derivative of horror, you look at John Skip and you look at David J. Scow, and then even kind of, well, Clive Barker's an interesting one because Clive Barker, he can play in either of those modes. I mean, Clive Barker can do what on earth Clive Barker wants to do. But in terms of, yeah, the mainstream horror and the traditional definition and the mainstream thriller is certainly pacier. And you'd probably, if you picked up your kind of Barnes and Noble commercial thriller paperback, and then you got a massive description for pages about a house, you'd probably be a bit annoyed. What's going on here? But if you opened an Adam Neville book and you didn't get the description about the house, you'd be like, Adam, what's happened here? What's going on?
Yes, that
So
someone being held hostage.
yeah. But I think again, like with the podcast, setting your why, I think as a writer, if your why is because you enjoy writing and you want to tell stories, then I think it's dangerous to almost think too much about genre in the composition when you are in the moment of writing. Because if you do that, you're probably going to suck some of the joy out of it. You're
Mhm.
going to suck some of the authenticity out of it. And you're going to probably suck like just the heart of the story because you're now entering editing mode or marketing mode when you should be in creative mode and composition mode. So I try not to think about genre convention much in the writing. And some people, both detractors and fans of my work, will be like, yeah, mate, it totally shows. So I don't know, but if I was setting out purely to write a book to sell it commercially, then it would be completely different. But I've spoke about this before, but if I was primarily doing it with commercial considerations, then I might as well just be doing something else. I might as well be a lawyer or an accountant or
Yeah, you'd make
you
more
know,
money.
it, very, very likely. And you know that there's so many dangers. There's so many dangers in terms of setting out to write something mainstream or setting out to write something to sell it. One, there are absolutely no guarantees as to
Mhm.
whether it will sell. Two, trends come and go. So if you start writing what's on trend now, it won't be by the time it's published. Now,
Yeah, you got
if you're a
two
fast
years.
writer, yeah,
Yeah.
if you're a fast writer, it might be on trend by the time you submit it. But publishing cycles, that's a different beast. Um, and if you were writing something purely to sell it, to make money, to maximize money, then you probably want to be with the bigger publishers, assuming you didn't have a kind of pre-existing fan base anyway.
Mhm.
So I don't know. I encourage people to write write what you want to write and try and tap into the childlike joy that made you write in the first place. Try and write with the heart and the meaning that you had when you started doing this because particularly if you were doing this as a child or a young adult, you weren't thinking about Goodreads reviews or bestseller lists or any of that BS. You were doing it because this was what brought you joy. And so I've said many times, if you can find joy in the pursuit of writing, then you win every time. And, I should caveat this by saying, of course, I want to make money through my writing, and I do what I can to kind of maximize that possibility. But what I don't do is I don't compromise the book or the
Mhm.
story. It is a personal choice. I'm not kind of belittling or poking fun at people who make these choices. And if I did and then they were successful, they'd be like, oh no, MDW's making fun of us while we roll around on our bed of money. Don't we feel upset? So I'm sure, people wouldn't take exception to it, but I I just find that like the time to be doing the marketing and the selling, that's after you've got the book. Then it's like, right, I've written this weird book like Daddy's Boy, my dark comedy that at the heart it is about a father and son relationship, but you have to wade through a sea of sausages and dick jokes to get there. It's like how am I gonna even market this? But that is a problem for me after writing.
Yeah.
You know, if I was thinking about that during the writing, that I mean, there probably wouldn't be any of it left. I mean, all the obscure references to British politicians such as Jeremy Corbyn, they'd be gone. There'd be no old 80s TV presenters like Andy Peters. Say goodbye to him. Say goodbye to Rolf Harris. That might be a good decision, actually. But yeah, there'd be no book. So
I had a similar thing with this. I used the Oregon Trail on the Apple IIe in a book or a manuscript that I wrote recently. And it was pointed out to me that my characters were probably too young to play Oregon Trail on the Apple IIe, but I was just like, no, I'm gonna leave it in there because I like it.
I don't know. I mean, anyone can kind of do anything if you have the conviction that they're
Yes,
doing it. You know, and age is but a number anyway, and what's to say that you don't discover
yes,
these
yeah.
kind of things anyway? You don't, I mean, you don't need to have the history. It's like, so this is how they found out about it. That would be a boring section to probably cut. Which I think, you know, a writing lesson is to know what you write. So I know
Mhm.
so much about the origin story as to how characters discovered these obscure things. But then you don't info dump. You don't need to put that in. So you should know what you write, but you don't need to show your workings. This isn't a math test or anything.
That's
You
true.
know, yeah, much to Paul Tremblay, known math teacher as well as a writer. You'll be dismayed to hear that.
So you are a British author
Yes,
living in Japan.
that's
How does
right.
that happen?
How does that happen? I love the way you phrased it.
Well, I
I'm
almost ended up living in Nigeria, and if I was doing a podcast, it'd be like, oh yeah, how did I end up in Nigeria?
oh,
But yes.
why are you asking me, a British writer, how I ended up in Japan when you've now revealed there's a story as to how you nearly ended up living in
Well,
Nigeria?
this is what I'm saying. Sometimes that has an influence on us living abroad, cross-cultural. You are also a dad,
Yeah,
and
yes.
rumor has it the Japanese style of parenting. There are TV shows about it, where the little kids get a flag that says that they're by themselves and they're sent to go to the store. And you know, that's to me that's sort of an interesting thing. I believe it or not, a lot of dad lit authors who have reached out to me are living abroad. Czech Republic, um, Japan. Some were in the military, so are recently back, but they were living abroad and writing when they were in the military. So I was sort of intrigued as to you sort of um, the sun never sets on the British Empire, also never sets on Dadlit because we've got
Yeah.
Japan, Australia, etc.
Yeah, and I should probably back up because maybe I miscommunicated it or I didn't kind of phrase it clearly enough. What I meant was you have a story about nearly living in Nigeria.
Well,
Let's
we'll
talk
see.
about that. Then I'll
Well,
tell you how I ended up living in Japan. But are you kidding me? You nearly ended up living in Nigeria? I
yes,
want to hear that.
my wife is a public health professor, and at the time, she was managing a research portfolio for the President's AIDS Initiative in Africa. And she was doing two different countries. She was doing Nigeria and Uganda. So what was regularly happening was, and this was before COVID, um, for about 2 years before COVID, she would go for a week every month, fly over, do site visits, that sort of stuff. And of course, the next step was to be in a sort of country director level position, which would be a person who's in charge on the ground, operating out of the U.S. Embassy or one of the partner organization offices. So there was talk of us going to Abuja, which is the capital of Nigeria, and of course I got to learn a lot about Abuja. I never made it there. I ended up going to South Africa for one of her conferences instead. And we ended up not going mostly because COVID. COVID, uh, everyone ended up staying home, and by the end of that, I had my daughter on the way, and my wife was of the opinion that it would be very difficult to have a child and continue the travel schedule versus moving to Abuja. But by then I'd gotten a different job and was very happy with it. And so we ended up sticking around. We haven't left.
Wow. Well, there it is. The almost moving
The
to
almost moving.
the
I was kind of
Nigeria
excited.
story, and
Yeah.
another casualty of COVID. Just that was essentially
Well,
what blocked you.
it was a casualty, but I think also we would have never had our daughter had COVID not happened. So our daughter is a COVID baby. So it's sort of
Okay.
I call it a plus one decision.
All right. Well, I mean, in terms of moving to Japan, so I've actually lived in Japan on three separate occasions. So the first time was in 2014. And I mean, at the time, I was working for a publisher in the UK. I was working for Rebellion Publishing, who own Abaddon Books and Solaris and 2000 AD, most notable for the Judge Dredd graphic novels.
Mhm.
And so, in terms of my career, I was finally kind of going in the direction that I wanted to go in after doing a kind of number of just like office admin jobs. But I thought, well, I've been living in the UK for all of my life. I want to experience something outside of the UK. Well, I mean, the only thing that really would get me to move from my publishing and actually being on that kind of dream career path was living in another country. I think that's a
Mhm.
pretty good reason to stop that job. And me and my ex-wife, who was my wife at the time, otherwise this would be a very weird story. we thought we want to live in the East and we want to live in Asia because we're kind of looking for that cultural experience that is just a little bit different and more removed from the West. And so originally we were thinking about moving to South Korea, and we were looking at ways that we could do this. And one of the easiest routes, I suppose, is teaching English as a foreign language. So I got a qualification for that. I was like going to kind of night school at the same time as publishing. and running This Is Horror. So I do a lot of things at once so that I had the qualification already. And we're looking at South Korea. We've thrown some applications in. But then I remember that, well, she loved Japan. And I said, why aren't we trying to go to Japan? Why aren't we looking at this as an option? And essentially, it was because kind of statistically it looked a little bit easier to get in to South Korea. But I thought, well, you got to aim at the top. Let's go for what we want. And so then we decided to apply to Japan. We got an acceptance, and then off we went. And so at that point, I just want to experience a new country. I don't know that much about Japan, whereas my wife was, really obsessed with Japan and really excited for it. But then in that initial year when we were there, I just fell in love with the country. So much about not only the nature and the culture, but like the kindness of the people and things that it seemed like a novelty how you could be on public transport really late at night and not
And
have
be
to
safe.
worry. You basically, not worry that there might be some sort of attack, or you've got to keep an eye on people because you might get into some sort of a fight. And I had a lot growing up. I was into a lot of heavy metal. I had like the long black hair, little bit of eyeliner. People didn't like that.
Yeah.
They were not happy about that. They wanted to fight me because of my haircut. Now I don't have any hair. Maybe they'll want to fight me over that at some point too.
I, as a fellow bald man, I hope that will never become the case.
I hope not. No, I mean we're generally not seen as a threat, and maybe people like that they see us in a follically challenged nature, and they think, leave him alone. He's been through enough. We don't need to fight him too. He's had a hard enough life.
The long-suffering bald man.
Yeah, he's like. Even his hair has left him. It's a sad story. But anyway, this safety, it seemed like a novelty at first, but then I thought, well, why shouldn't I be able to feel safe every day and not have to worry about, knife crime and being attacked? So,
Well, yeah, this sort of gets to the thing of parenting in Japan, which tends to empower young kids very early to learn to do things and to engage in society. Did you buy into that with your child?
okay, so there's so much to say in terms of parenting, and so I'll have to get quite personal. People who have read House of Bad Memories, there's quite a lot of me and autobiography in that. So like me and my ex, we had a child for the first. So I should say as well, like I said, I've lived in Japan 3 times. So the second time my wife got pregnant, and then we decided to move back to the UK for her to give birth.
Yeah.
So then the first 18 months of my daughter's life, I was essentially the stay-at-home dad. I was writing, I was podcasting, I was editing, but I was the main person bringing her up. Then after that, we went back to Japan, although actually I went back to Japan for she was meant to come a few weeks later because of the way that visas work, but I went back and the next day they didn't let anyone else in because of COVID. Or maybe
Oh,
because they saw
no.
me coming in and they thought, oh, bloody hell, if he's, no, we've got to close the borders now. We don't want any more like him. So then after raising my daughter for 18 months, I then didn't see her for 6 months. So
Jeez.
that was a difficult time. And then, and then when they came back, about a month later, me and my wife split up. Um,
Well, I'm
and
sorry to
and
hear that.
it, yeah, it like and then this just keeps going. And then about 6 months later, like my wife moved away, and then I didn't there was a very messy custody and divorce battle, and
Yes.
I essentially didn't see my daughter for nearly 2 years.
Oh, no.
And like I didn't have any contact with her. So that, yeah, it's a difficult it was a difficult time, to understate it in classic British terms.
Yeah, I think I
Um
can now understand the ongoing biographical elements of
yeah.
of that book. Well, I'm sorry to
y-
hear that.
Yeah. So I should say, so then I'd seen her just as she turned 3 years old. And then when I saw her after that, it was fast approaching her fifth birthday.
Hmm.
Um, but now I see her every month and we talk every week.
Yeah.
So things are a lot, well, of course they're a lot better. Um, I haven't announced this on any podcast, and I haven't even told. There's a lot of close friends who I haven't told, but it's relevant to this discussion, and I better tell some friends quickly. But actually, so so then I got remarried. They know that part. It's not like a surprise. So my first child was with a British woman, and then I got married to a Japanese woman. We've been married. Well, we've been together for over 4 years. We've been married over a year now. And then we found out recently, you can probably guess where this is going, that we're going to have a child. So then that's the bit that quite a lot of my friends don't know. If you're hearing it on the Dad Lid podcast, surprise.
Yes, we've
Um,
broken the story on the
yeah.
Dadlet pod.
So yeah, like fingers crossed everything goes okay. And then
Well, congratulations.
yeah, yeah, thank you. I've taken you and perhaps the listeners on a big roller coaster of just like telling you my life for the last 7 years, all to then answer the question that I've evaded like a politician again, to reference the start of the conversation. So, in terms of the Japanese way of parenting, often what happens with childcare leave is that if the mother and the father are both working, it's not uncommon that they will take a year off, and then after that the child will be put into essentially the equivalent of kindergarten or
Yeah.
nursery. Um, for me, that makes me feel uncomfortable. I don't want to give my literally just turned 1 year old to to a nursery. Now, again, people have to make their own decisions. If you do, I'm not knocking it, but for me, like I guess I just don't trust people that easily, which after what I've been through is maybe understandable, but I don't feel comfortable giving my child over like that. In terms of what's going to happen with our child that should be born in December, we'll see how it goes. But I would imagine either me or my wife will then take further time off to look after the child until they're at least like well, I would think at least 3 years old minimum feels comfortable to me. Again, a personal choice, but that that this might be kind of how this almost young independence comes into play in in Japan. And then, when the child goes to school, so that they start a little bit later than in the UK. So regular elementary school will start at 6 years old. And then often the child walks to school on their own.
Mhm.
That's just kind of what happens. Um, Again, yeah, probably being raised in the UK, that feels like a very bad idea. Um, but I think what you may have been alluding to is a show that was on Netflix. I believe it's called Old Enough, and
Yeah.
then they're sending more like 2-year olds to go to the supermarket. Um, yeah, like these are probably parts of the culture shock that, well, are still culturally shocking to me. I know that Japan is much safer than the UK in terms of, I mean, obviously, like it's a bigger discussion than just saying it's safer, but in terms of if you let your 2-year-old walk to the shop, there's less chance that they're going to be kidnapped, to put it in crude terms. However, less chance does not mean
Yeah,
zero
zero
chance.
chance. Yeah.
And so, I mean, often in life, I make a risk reward calculation. So let's say I think the reward, because I'm not for this at all. But
Yeah.
let's pretend let's pretend I am. So what's the reward for letting my 2-year-old go to the supermarket and pick up some ramen for the family? Um, I guess the reward is that they're fostering independence, and I don't have to go, so that's
Yeah.
nice.
Yeah.
What is this? I've got a little worker, a little illegal worker. Is it some child slave rules that I'm seriously kind of compromising here? Well, okay, maybe they get some independence and I don't have to leave the house. That's the reward. The risk is that they might get kidnapped. So this is not a proportion at all. Oh no, which one? Ah, but I do save 10 minutes in the house. Also, I would imagine you're not even saving that time because the whole time you're thinking, I just let a 2-year-old go to the supermarket. So I do not, yeah, I don't agree with that.
Yeah. So you're not planning
Um,
on pursuing that vision.
no, no, I'm not. I've seen a few episodes of that show, and it makes me feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I feel uneasy. It's
Yeah. I've,
difficult to, because I want to say, as trying to be a good, understanding human being. I don't want to, knock people's choices, but also it's that would never be my choice.
yeah, I think I've thought about this a lot because I did write a horror manuscript. There's no telling if it'll, as you pointed out, they sitting down to write it doesn't mean it'll ever see the light of day. And I thought about that element of parenting and the idea of the true instance of horror being sort of the 30 seconds where you can't find your kid where you last saw them on the playground type of thing. And I think that capturing that and putting that in a bottle is the best way to sort of sell the idea of horror and the idea of fear. And and so when I sit down to write horror, I try and do that. That's what I try and capture. And in that way, I think it's tied into um the dad lit idea, right? That sort of underlying idea, which is why I was wondering if as part of your moving to Japan, you decided to embrace their more they're more, I'm not gonna, it's not really lax, it's a trusting vision of society and of handling children.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's a little bit nuanced and complicated. Of course, I always try to be respectful of, the Japanese culture and, being aware of like, look, I chose to be here.
Yeah.
Um, but equally, I mean, it's not going to hurt anybody or harm anyone if it's like, oh, he's like walking his child to the supermarket. It's not like, the UK. I could imagine if like it was the culture in the UK that you let your child walk, people would be taking the piss out of you. It's like, oh, look at you walking your child. Oh, throw something at him, like egg him. Child walking prick. But yeah, like no, yeah, that's not gonna harm anyone. I suppose, so with my 7-year-old daughter, she's living with her mum, so how she goes to school, whether she's left alone at home or anything like that, these are factors beyond my control. I've done everything for her. I do as much as I can, but there are some things that you just have to accept, even if you don't like it, that they're beyond my control.
Mhm.
When it comes to, my child with my wife, uh, coming in December, when, I mean, luckily there's 7 years until elementary school. I,
Yeah, so
I,
you got time.
yeah, I've got time, but the thing is that it appears that it's typically, as far as I understand, that when it comes to walking to school, so they're not walking to school fully alone. Often there will be like someone from a higher grade walking
Yeah.
with them, and there might be like a group of them. And I think to begin with, there'll be like an adult. So it's not like it's your first day of school, right? Out the door. How do I get there? I don't know. Use Google Maps. It's day one. Get out. So there are things in place. So I think there will be different factors like, okay, how near is our house to the school? That will
Yeah.
be a big factor to begin with. And are there other people like I would not let our child at 7 years old walk on their own.
Mhm.
That's how I feel about that. Um, and like, I've been trying to think when did I in the UK walk to school alone? Like I can't I think I was definitely walking to school alone at 9. Um and like I think actually my mum kind of walked to school with me at a point where I thought, oh, it's embarrassing. No, oh, fuck off, mum. What are you doing? Like, then I am gonna have people make fun. Oh, he's walking with his mum. No, go away. Um, so like, but that would be a consideration as well. You don't want in trying to protect your child that they're now
No.
getting bullied. So, so then like I've thought about that. It's like, well, so would I let them go? But then am I kind of following? No, but you don't follow kids, mate. What are you doing? This bold guy following a group of kids. So Yeah, I think it's just weighing up the situation, but I won't be letting them go to the supermarket on their own. It just doesn't seem necessary to do that. And there's
Yeah.
um will I be trusting people more? Because yeah, no, I think maybe living in Japan in a sense is the best of both worlds because I've got the Western inherent distrust, but coupled with the relative safety of living in Japan. So I won't trust, but at the same time, I'm quite lucky that
Yeah,
often nothing will happen anyway. And
that you won't worry as much.
yeah, yeah. So that's kind of where I am. And I think, that there are different there is never a perfect place to live, just the perfect place for you at a certain season in your life.
Mm,
And so there are always different worries and trade-offs, in Japan, there's a rather brutal phrase that is essentially the nail that stands out must be hammered down. So even in being uh British or like half Japanese, half British, you will stand out more.
yeah.
And typically in schools that can go one of two ways. Either you could be a bit of an outcast or yeah, people are excited. Um, God, I hate it sounds so bad to say that like, you're a novelty or there's some excitement, but it kind of is. And like also like I think to add some context, like ethnically and in terms of the makeup of Japan, it is 99.9% Japanese people.
Yep.
Like even like if I leave the house, like there can be people who are interested to see me and they want to talk to me, and it's not to be offensive, it's genuine curiosity. Because particularly living in Gifu, it's a little bit more rural.
Yep.
It I always saw the white bald guy. That's an event. that's, that's the day made. That's something to put in the journal. So yeah, they'll just be kind of different problems, and then that I mean the kind of darker side as well is like it is a more patriarchal society. It is less progressive. There are more problems that come with that. So
So is the next horror novel going to be about parenting in Japan?
he so so I've got a number of things that are either written or on the way. So then the novella that I've got that is currently on submission, that is one that's set in the UK. It does involve parenting, and it does involve obsession and paranoia. These things often happen a lot in my books. It involves some stalking. Not stalking children walking to school. That's not the stalking involved. So that's the one on submission. I'm working on a collaborative novel that is just like nothing I've done before. It's kind of like uh, Takashi Miike meets Ryu Murakami with a bit of Quentin Tarantino, set in Yakuza heavy Japan in a sleep cafe. This
Hmm.
is like a wild psychedelic novel I mean, I guess it's broadly a dark crime thriller. It's very difficult for me to classify. And then I'm toying with some other ideas, but I do think going forward, I'm going to be setting more novels and novellas in Japan.
Hmm.
And I think inevitably, yeah, parenting and relationships will come into it. They come into a lot of my stories.
Hmm.
So I write my curiosity, I write kind of my concerns, and in a way, like, even though I hope that these novels are entertaining and perhaps people learn something from them, that they do find, and I do find with short stories too, like you're almost documenting your life, even if indirectly. If I read a story and it's seemingly, if I reread one of my stories, which I don't make a habit of doing, that'll be like, oh, this is a good one. I'll pick one up by myself. But I can tell, like, kind of where I was at that time and what I was thinking. So, kind of storytelling can be a good way of documenting your own life.
Hmm. Well, let's end on that. Do you want to plug your most recent books and This Is Horror?
Yeah, so the most recent book that I've written is a dark comedy called Daddy's Boy. It's certainly the most overtly comedic thing that I've written. So, I mean, House of Bad Memories, the one before, is a dark thriller with comedic elements. Daddy's Boy, I mean, the clue is in the title. It is a dark comedy with thriller elements.
Hmm.
I'm just going to read you the synopsis to give you a sense as to what Daddy's Boy is, because I think that will encapsulate kind of the madness and what's going on. From the author of The Girl in the Video and House of Bad Memories comes a dark comedy of errors and toilet humor. Wentworth is at his wit's end. He has no money. His cat's been kidnapped, and every time he tries to kill himself, he fails. Worst of all, he lives in Kidderminster. But sometimes you're given a lifeline. For some, it's a lottery win. For others, a promotion. For Wentworth, it's an out of shape 50 something named Norman wearing an I was on Naked Attraction t shirt and scuffed Reeboks. Wentworth thinks he's in luck, but makes a series of progressively worse decisions and soon finds himself on the run from a gang of criminal reprobates. The two flee to Norman's holiday home, but there's a local serial killer on the loose. Something messed up is happening next door, and Norman is becoming uncomfortably clingy. Can Wentworth evade the criminal mob, shake off Norman's advances, and uncover his neighbor's secrets before he falls victim to the approaching serial killer? Daddy's Boy is shameless meets Guy Ritchie's The Gentleman with the incompetence of The Hangover. So that's
Nice,
Daddy's Boy.
nice. That's Daddy's Boy. Well,
Yeah.
obviously, also tune in to This Is Horror, the podcast. I've listened to it. It's great. And thank you so much, Michael, for being on the pod.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. This has been a lot of fun, and I hope we can do it again sometime.
Hopefully soon. Hopefully, I'll
All
be able
right.
to provide you with something to read and come on your pod.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
hell yeah. All right. Thank you again.
thank you.
Our time together has come to an end. It's time to return to your wife, kids, and friends. It's time to pick up those books you forgot while you wait for the next Dad Lit Pod.